I was 14 when I died, and 29 when I came back to life. My name is Morgan Hale, or it was, until the woman who murdered me made it into a brand. A tragedy. A fundraising tool for her philanthropy, until she turned my death into the foundation of her empire and my absence into the proof of her suffering. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a story that requires starting at the end, or what should have been the end, and working backward to the resurrection. My father, Henry Hale, was a man who collected rare things. First editions of novels no one had read, wines from vineyards that had burned in wildfires, watches that ticked in safes, never worn, their value measured in absence rather than use. And in 2005, when I was 8 and my mother had been dead for 2 years, he collected Gloria. She was 35. He was 50. She had the kind of beauty that looked expensive even when she wore nothing, high cheekbones, blonde hair that fell in a perfect sheet, blue eyes that held your gaze slightly too long, as if calculating your worth. She was a real estate agent who had sold him a vacation home in Napa. Within 6 months, she had sold him on the idea of a new wife. I didn't like her. Children are supposed to be suspicious of stepmothers, and I was a child who had read too many fairy tales, who saw the wolf in every well-dressed stranger. But Gloria was careful. She bought me dolls I didn't want, took me to appointments I didn't need, photographed us together for her social media with captions about blended family bliss. She was performing motherhood, and I was the prop in her production. My father saw none of it. He saw a woman who made him feel young, who laughed at his jokes, who didn't cry at the mention of my mother the way his friends' wives did. He saw a second chance. And when Gloria suggested a family bonding trip to Lake Tahoe in the summer of 2011, he saw an opportunity to make us whole. I saw the way Gloria looked at me when he wasn't watching. The way her smile dropped, just for a second when I spoke. The way she touched my shoulder, not gently, but with the pressure of someone measuring where to place a blade. I should have told him. I was 14, old enough to know that something was wrong, young enough to believe that adults would fix it if I just found the right words. But I didn't find them. And on the third day of that trip, Gloria found me instead. We were kayaking. Just Gloria and me. My father had stayed at the lodge for a conference call, some deal that couldn't wait. Gloria had insisted on the alone time. Quality bonding, she called it. Girl time. The lake was cold, even in July. The water was the color of dark glass, deep enough to swallow sound. We paddled to a cove where the shore was rocky and the trees overhung the water, where no one could see us from the main beach. "You're a strong swimmer, aren't you, Morgan?" Gloria asked, her voice light, conversational. "I guess," I said. I was. My mother had taught me before she died in a community pool that smelled of chlorine in summer. I could hold my breath for almost a minute. I could tread water for 10. "Good," Gloria said. And then she reached over, grabbed the strap of my life jacket and unbuckled it. I didn't understand, not at first. I thought it was a joke, a prank, something that would end with laughter and a lecture about safety. I reached for the buckle and Gloria pushed my hand away. Then she pushed me. The kayak tipped. I fell backward into the water, the cold shocking my lungs, my arms flailing for the boat that Gloria was already riding. I surfaced, gasping, and she was sitting there, perfectly composed, watching me. "Swim back," she said. "It's not far," but it was far. The cove was half a mile from the lodge, around a rocky point hidden from view. And the current, I felt it now, pulling me away from the shore toward the deeper water where the lake dropped into darkness. "Please," I said, "help me." "I can't." "You can," Gloria said, and she smiled, not the performance smile, but something real, something hungry. "You're strong, your mother taught you well. But strong girls drown too, Morgan. They drown when no one is watching, when no one cares enough to look." She picked up her paddle. She turned the kayak, and she left me there, floating in the cold, watching her blonde head disappear around the point. I swam. I don't know how. The cold should have killed me, the current should have taken me, my panic should have drowned me. But I swam. I found a log, clung to it, let the current carry me while I shivered and cried and promised God everything I had if he would just let me live. A fishing family found me at dusk. I was hypothermic, delirious, barely conscious. They wrapped me in blankets, took me to their cabin, called the police. But when the officers arrived, they didn't take me to my father. They took me to a hospital. And at the hospital, they told me something that made me vomit into a bedpan. Gloria had already reported me dead. Welcome to Little Bunny Stories. If you're new here, my name is Morgan, or Riley, depending on which part of my life you're asking about. This is the story of how I let the world believe I was dead so I could learn how to live. If you've ever had someone erase you and call it grief, if you've ever had to choose between your name and your survival, subscribe. This one's for you. Here's my story. Gloria's story was simple, elegant, effective. Morgan Hale, 14, had gone kayaking alone against her stepmother's warnings and had fallen into the water. Gloria had tried to save her, had risked her own life, had been pulled back by the current. By the time help arrived, Morgan was gone. The body was never found, likely carried to the deep, the coroner noted, where recovery is impossible. There was a funeral. I learned about it later, from newspaper clippings I collected like evidence. A closed casket, empty, of course, draped in white lilies. Gloria in black, weeping beautifully, supported by my father, who looked like he had aged 20 years in a week. A eulogy about our angel, taken too soon. A scholarship fund established in my name. And buried in the coverage, a note about the trust fund I would have inherited at 21, $2.3 million, established by my mother's family, now transferred to the surviving family for administration. Gloria administered it. Within a year, she had bought a new house in Napa. Within 2, she had launched a foundation, the Morgan Hale Memorial Fund for Grieving Families, that raised money from wealthy donors who wanted to associate with tragedy. Within 3, she had replaced me. Not literally. But she found a girl, 17, runaway, vaguely similar to me in the way that all blonde teenagers look similar in certain lights, and she adopted her. Named her Morgan. Or rather, let the press call her Morgan's legacy, the daughter Morgan never had, the child who helped Gloria heal. The girl's real name was Amber, and she played her part for 3 years before running away with a boyfriend and a few $1,000s of Gloria's money. Gloria never reported her missing. Just found another girl, younger, more controllable. A perpetual rotation of daughters who kept the narrative alive. And my father, Henry Hale, the man who collected rare things, who had collected Gloria and lost his actual treasure, he died in 2019. The obituary said of a broken heart following the loss of his beloved daughter. I knew better. I had been watching. I had seen Gloria bring him pills for his nerves, for his sleep, for his heart. I had seen him fade, confused, gentle Henry becoming a ghost in his own home. The death certificate said heart failure. I suspected something else, but I was Riley Novak by then, and Riley Novak had no standing to suspect anything about the Hale family. Riley Novak. The name they gave me at the hospital when I refused to tell them who I was. A social worker, a woman named Alina who had seen too many runaways, too many abused children, too many kids who were safe or unknown, helped me build the identity. Birth certificate, lost in a fire. Parents, dead in a car accident. No records, no history, no one looking for me. I became Riley at 14. I stayed Riley for 15 years, and I learned to be someone else so thoroughly that sometimes I forgot Morgan had ever existed. I studied. That was my escape, my revenge, my way of making sense of a world that had swallowed me whole. I finished high school in Nevada, working nights at a diner, saving every dollar. I went to community college, then transferred to UC Davis for accounting, not because I loved numbers, but because I understood that money was the language Gloria spoke, and I wanted to be fluent. I discovered forensic accounting almost by accident, an elective that became an obsession. The tracing of hidden transactions, the discovery of fraud, the way numbers told stories that people tried to bury. I was good at it. I had a mind for patterns, for discrepancies, for the small anomalies that indicated larger crimes. Maybe because I had spent my childhood watching Gloria perform, learning to spot the gap between appearance and reality. I graduated at 22. I worked for the state for 3 years, investigating tax fraud, learning the system from the inside. Then I applied to the FBI. I was 26 when they accepted me, 27 when I finished training, 28 when I was assigned to the Financial Crimes Unit in San Francisco. I was Riley Novak, federal agent. I had a badge, a gun I rarely carried, an apartment in Oakland with a view of the bay. I had colleagues who knew me as quiet, competent, slightly mysterious, the woman who never talked about her past, who deflected personal questions with professionalism, who worked late and took no vacations. I had a life. It was not the life I wanted, but it was the life I had built, piece by piece, from the ashes of the girl who had drowned in Lake Tahoe. And I had a file, not official, personal, a digital folder labeled GH that I added to obsessively, meticulously over 15 years. Gloria Hale, her finances, her properties, her relationships, her crimes. I knew about the trust fund, drained through shell companies and fake charitable expenses. I knew about the adopted daughters, a rotation of vulnerable girls used as props. I knew about my father's decline, the medications, the isolation. I knew enough to arrest her, if I had been anyone else, if the evidence had been gathered legally, if I had been willing to explain why Riley Novak cared so much about a woman she had never met. But I was not anyone else. I was Morgan Hale, officially dead, legally non-existent. And I had a plan that required patience, precision, and the willingness to let Gloria destroy herself. The wedding announcement came in January 2026. Gloria Hale, 56, widow and philanthropist, was engaged to Victor Ashford, 70, tech entrepreneur recently widowed, worth approximately $400 million. The ceremony would be in June at the Napa estate, an intimate celebration for 200 guests. I read the announcement at my desk. During a lunch I didn't eat. I read it again. And I understood that Gloria was not just repeating her pattern, she was accelerating it. Victor was older than my father had been, wealthier, more isolated. He had adult children who lived on the East Coast, a foundation that needed management, a life that Gloria could drain more efficiently than she had drained mine. I could have warned him, could have called anonymously, sent documents, done the thing that Riley Novak would do if she were a good agent rather than a ghost with a grudge. But Morgan Hale had waited 15 years, and Morgan Hale was done waiting. I took leave from the FBI, personal time, accumulated over years of no vacations. I rented a house in Napa, a modest cottage on the edge of a vineyard, close enough to Gloria's world to observe, far enough to remain invisible. I grew out my hair, dyed it auburn, wore contacts that changed my dark eyes to hazel. I was not Morgan. I was not quite Riley. I was someone new, someone constructed for this specific purpose. I became Riley Novak again, but a different version. A financial consultant from San Francisco, specializing in nonprofit management, recommended by a colleague Gloria trusted. I approached her foundation with an offer, free consultation, no commitment, just admiration for your work with grieving families. Gloria, always hungry for validation, accepted. We met in her office, a sunlit room in the Napa estate that had been my father's, that had been mine, that Gloria had redecorated until no trace of either of us remained. She looked good, better than good. She looked expensive, preserved, the kind of woman who spent $10,000 a month on maintenance and called it self-care. Riley, she said, extending a hand with manicured nails. What a pleasure. I'm always happy to meet someone who understands the importance of our mission. I shook her hand. I smiled. I did not flinch or tremble, or let any of the 14-year-old girl inside me scream. The Morgan Hale Fund is legendary, I said, and the name tasted like copper, like blood, like the lake water I had swallowed 15 years ago. I'd love to learn more about your approach. Your personal story must be inspiring. Gloria's eyes glistened with tears or performance or both. Morgan was my heart, she said, and her voice cracked perfectly, a note she had practiced for years. Losing her taught me that life is fragile, that we must cherish every moment. That's why I do this work, to honor her memory. I nodded, took notes, asked follow-up questions. I spent 3 months insinuating myself into her circle, attending her events, meeting her friends, listening to her complain about the daughter who never appreciated me, who would have grown up to be difficult, I'm sure, but I loved her anyway. I heard her tell the story of my death a dozen times. Each time, it grew more dramatic. The kayak accident became a heroic rescue attempt, Gloria swimming into the cold, risking hypothermia, pulling me to shore before the current took me. The empty casket became a symbol of hope beyond death, of a mother's refusal to let go. The trust fund became Morgan's legacy, which I managed with trembling responsibility. She never mentioned pushing me, never mentioned unbuckling my life jacket, never mentioned watching me drown while she paddled away. And she never recognized me. 15 years, a different hair color, contact lenses, the subtle changes of adulthood, I was not the girl she had killed. I was a stranger who admired her, who flattered her, who listened to her lies with the patience of a predator studying prey. I became, in those months, something I had never intended to be. I became Gloria's friend, or the closest thing she had to one. The wedding was scheduled for June 12th. I was invited, Gloria's dear friend Riley, who had helped her navigate some financial complexities in the foundation. I watched her plan it with the same meticulous attention she had applied to my funeral. The flowers, white lilies, Morgan's favorite, she told the florist, though I had hated them, though they had been her choice for the empty casket. The venue, the estate chapel, decorated with photos of Gloria and Victor, Gloria and her adopted daughters, Gloria alone, radiant, surviving. I watched Victor too. He was gentle, hesitant, a man who had made his fortune in software and never learned to read people. He had lost his wife of 40 years to cancer, had met Gloria at a charity gala, had been swept into her orbit by the force of her need. He wanted companionship. He wanted not to be alone. He didn't see what Gloria saw, not a partner, but a resource. I could have saved him, could have told him the truth, shown him the files, warned him away. But I didn't, because saving Victor was not my goal. My goal was to make Gloria watch her own destruction, to let her build her perfect day and then stand in the ruins. I told myself this was justice. I told myself Morgan deserved it. I told myself that the 14-year-old girl in the cold water would have wanted this, would have demanded this, would have grown up to be someone capable of such precision. I didn't tell myself that I was becoming Gloria, using people as means, calculating costs, letting others suffer for my narrative. I didn't tell myself because I wasn't ready to hear it. The wedding day was perfect. Blue sky, warm breeze, the scent of lilies and expensive perfume. Gloria walked down the aisle in white, not ivory, not cream but pure white, the color of brides and virgins and empty caskets. Victor waited at the altar, trembling slightly, smiling with the hope of a man who believed he had found love in his final chapter. I sat in the third row, dressed in sage green, the color of new growth, of camouflage, of things that hide before they strike. The ceremony was brief. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed. The minister, Gloria's pastor, a man who had presided at my funeral, pronounced them husband and wife. They kissed, the guests applauded. And then, the reception. I waited. I let Gloria have her first dance, her first toast, her first hour of being the center of attention. I let her introduce me to Victor, my dear friend Riley, who has been such a support, and I shook his hand and smiled and said congratulations like I meant it. Then I walked to the bar. I ordered champagne. And I carried 2 glasses to where Gloria stood, surrounded by admirers, glowing with the satisfaction of another performance completed. To the bride, I said, extending a glass. To new beginnings, Gloria replied, clinking hers against mine. I drank, she drank. And then I spoke, loudly enough for the guests nearest us to hear, softly enough that it felt intimate, conspiratorial. Do you remember Lake Tahoe, Gloria? She froze. The glass in her hand trembled, just slightly. The water was so cold that day, I continued. July, but the lake doesn't care about summer. It just takes what you give it. Do you remember what you gave it? I don't know what you gave it me, I said. You unbuckled my life jacket. You pushed me over. You watched me drown. And then you organized a funeral with an empty casket and white lilies and a scholarship fund that paid for this house, this dress, this life. The guests around us had gone silent. Gloria's smile was still fixed, but her eyes were darting, searching for escape, for explanation, for the performance that would make this make sense. You're confused, she said, her voice too high. You're having some kind of episode. Victor, help me, I'm not confused, I said. I'm Morgan, Morgan Hale, the daughter you killed, the girl you replaced, the ghost who has been watching you for 15 years. I reached into my purse. I pulled out an envelope. I handed it to Victor, who was staring at me with the confusion of a man who had just learned that his wedding was not what he thought. Documents, I said. Financial records. Transfers from the Morgan Hale Trust Fund to shell companies controlled by your wife. The adoption records of her daughters, all runaways, all paid performers, all dismissed when they became inconvenient. And a toxicology report from a private lab, suggesting that Henry Hale's death was not natural causes. Victor opened the envelope. He read the first page. His face changed from confusion to understanding to something that looked like grief or rage or both. These are lies, Gloria said, but her voice was shrinking, the performance failing, the mask cracking. She's insane. She's obsessed with me. I'm the woman you tried to drown, I said. And I'm not insane. I'm patient. I learned patience in the water, Gloria. I learned it watching you from the shore, from the shadows, from the life I built while you spent the one you stole from me. I turned to the guests. Not all of them, just the ones nearest, the ones who had heard, who were already recording on their phones, already texting, already transforming this moment into content. I died at 14, I said. And for 15 years, I let the world believe it. Because being dead was safer than being Morgan Hale, the girl whose stepmother wanted her gone. But today I'm not dead. I'm here, and I want my name back. I didn't wait for Gloria's response. I didn't need to see her collapse, her arrest, her eventual downfall. I had already seen it in my mind 1,000 times. I walked out of the reception, down the driveway, past the lilies and the white decorations and the life I had never lived. I drove to my cottage. I packed my things, and I waited. The aftermath was not dramatic. not in the way I had imagined. Gloria was not arrested at her wedding. Victor, gentle Victor, took her aside, showed her the documents, asked for explanations she could not give. He annulled the marriage within the week. Fraud. His lawyers called it material misrepresentation. He could have pressed charges, could have destroyed her, but he was a man who had loved his first wife for 40 years and could not bear to see another woman destroyed, even one who had tried to destroy him. Gloria's destruction came from other sources. The guests at the wedding had recorded everything. The videos went viral, bride confronted by dead stepdaughter at wedding, and the press, which had celebrated Gloria's philanthropy, now dissected her fraud. The Morgan Hale Memorial Fund was investigated. The adopted daughters came forward, telling stories of manipulation and payment and dismissal. The trust fund was traced, the shell companies exposed, the tax fraud documented. I did not participate in the public spectacle. I gave one interview to a journalist I trusted, explaining only that I had survived, that I had built a new life, that I wanted my name back. I did not discuss Gloria's crimes. I did not discuss my father's death. I simply said, I am Morgan Hale, I am alive, and I am done being invisible. Gloria was arrested for tax fraud 3 months later. The murder charge, my attempted murder, was never filed. The statute of limitations had expired, or the evidence was insufficient, or the prosecutors decided that a woman who had already lost everything was not worth the cost of a trial. She went to prison for 5 years, a minimum security facility where she gave occasional interviews about the misunderstanding, the vendetta, the daughter who couldn't let go. I did not read them. I did not visit her. I received one letter, 6 months into her sentence, asking for forgiveness, offering explanations. I burned it unopened, not with rage, but with finality. Some doors, once closed, do not need to be reopened. I sold the Napa estate. Not to keep. I could not live in the house where Gloria had replaced me, where my father had faded, where my ghost had walked for 15 years. I sold it to a developer who converted it into a retreat center for survivors of domestic violence. The chapel where Gloria married Victor became a counseling room. The lily garden was replaced with vegetables and herbs. The room that had been mine, briefly, before I died, became a dormitory for teenagers who had escaped homes where they were not safe. I used the money to create something else. The Morgan Hale Foundation, my name, my choice, my legacy for young people who need to disappear to survive. Not forever, not the way I had disappeared, but temporarily, safely, with support and documentation, and the promise that they can reclaim their names when the danger has passed. I bought a cabin. Not in Napa, not in the world where Gloria had performed her philanthropy. In Lake Tahoe. Near the cove where she had pushed me, where I had almost died, where I had learned to swim in water that should have killed me. I live there now. I work remotely for the FBI, consulting on financial crimes, tracing the patterns that I learned to read in Gloria's lies. I have a cat, a garden, a view of the water that changes with the seasons. I am not happy. Exactly, happiness is a word for people who have not died and been reborn, but I am present. I am alive. I am Morgan Hale, and I am seen. The last time I heard from Victor, he sent a donation to the foundation. Not a large one. He had given most of his money to his children, to medical research, to causes that mattered. But enough, with a note. Not for her, for you, because you survived. I accepted it. Not because I needed the money, but because acceptance is a form of visibility. Because for 15 years no one had seen me, and now someone did, and the seeing was not conditional, not transactional, not a performance. It was simply, you are here, you are real. You are Morgan, and that finally was enough. I am Morgan Hale. I am 29 years old. I died at 14 and was reborn as Riley Novak, federal agent, ghost, patient, predator. I reclaimed my name not through vengeance but through presence, by walking into a room and saying, I am here, I am real, I am the girl you tried to erase. I did not forgive my stepmother. I did not save my father. I did not become a hero or a villain or a cautionary tale. I simply became visible. And for a girl who spent 15 years as a ghost, visibility is the only victory that matters. See you in the next story.